So how's everybody doing? Is everybody awake? Is everybody trying to stay awake? Waking up? You got people all over the world today, it looks like. So tons of people in here. Give me a shout out where you guys are located. We already got some people from Norway, London, Malaysia, Manchester, San Francisco, all over the place. So my name is Joseph Drust, and today we've got a ZBrush Masters artist here, Paul Deasy, and he is an amazing ZBrush artist. If you've seen any of his stuff on ZBrush Central, I'll put a little link here to his gallery on ZBrush Central here. His stuff is extremely clean. That's the first thing that when I look at any of his models he's done, it's just like the cleanest stuff you have ever seen. And so today he's going to go through his process and show you all how he achieves that magic. So no pressure. So I'm going to let him take over from here, and then I'll be fielding questions along the way. So if I can answer them in chat, I'll do that. And if any of them I think that Paul can like or would like to answer, I'll feed them his questions as well. But I'm going to just give it to Paul, and go ahead. It's all you.
Cheers. Thanks, Joseph. Well, thanks for everyone who's joined in. So today what I want to do is I'm going to try and break down my workflow so that it can something that's easily digestible. So I've actually shared this on my Instagram as well if anyone wants to have a look at it, and I'll throw it up here so you can screenshot it or anything if you want, just in case, something to reference later if you do find anything of this helps in your workflow. You can reference back to this. So I'm gonna start with, I got a nice character from Randy Bishop's work, so I'm going to be sculpting this today, and I'm going to start from scratch and go through this process. So will be the most important part is the blocking it out. This is where it kind of, the cleanliness comes from, is how you block it out, and that would be, that's where you most of your time should be spent, because that's your kind of foundation. So we'll get into that, and then I'll show you why. Some people have asked me why pose is second, so I'll show you that shortly. This is more for stills, as opposed to production ready models, although some production ready models, depending on the studio, you might actually need to pose the character and then show it to your art directors and so on, and then neutralize everything. So it depends. But yeah, so we're going to get into this, and I'll show you how I block it out. So the important part when doing this is everything is in separate pieces, and that way you can work the shapes easier. So I'll show you here now. So what I want to do is, you can see here, I want to separate the cranium and then the jaw and cheeks. So we'll pull this around. Another part of this that I do all the time, my favorite ZBrush tool is ZRemesh, and I have a hotkey, so I'll always lower that number. I'll always ZRemesh, and that way I'm getting lower poly count. The reason we want lower poly count is because when you have a lot of polys, you get lumps and bumps everywhere. So again, to get that cleanliness in the final result, you want low poly to begin with, because you're going to make everything at that low poly count, and after, when the shapes are working, you can subdivide up and then add in any details like creases and so on, and that way your actual whole shape is, your curves and your creases are clean, because I'll show you now. So let's get this brow in. So an important part of this when you're doing it from 2D, you can see in this 2D, let me pull up the full image to make sure you can see it. The brows are really important. This sharp brow here. It's a really important part of the face. So I'm kind of punching that in early to make sure that that doesn't get lost while I'm working on everything else. So again, all this not great, so I'll just ZBrush, and that's why I keep that as a hotkey. Bring it a bit lower, so I want to keep all this nice and clean. Another thing in the, so this is where at this stage you want to really be, if you've ever done live drawing, you'll know this. You should be looking at your model well, in live drawing you should be looking at your model. In this you should be looking at your 2D more almost than your sculpt, because you want to make sure that you catch, like for example, this hard line, this straight line, like that's a statement, and you want to make sure that you capture these types of things. It's very easy to say, well, the back of a head is round, and so you're not looking at it the same way in live drawing. You're not really looking at it, you're just doing what's already in your head, the expectation of the shape of a head. So, and it's what's not normal in this, especially in a stylized character. It's where the proportions are pushed. It's what's not normal about the shapes that gives the character. So it's really important to capture that type of stuff. So I'm just gonna pinch the back of the head there, pull that up, because you notice the brow is really straight here as well. And the important part at this stage, especially to not waste time mainly, is to get every element in as quick as possible. Same as like when you're drawing, you focus on your broad strokes. Like I don't want to be going in here and focusing on trying to nail down exactly where that crease is, because if I do that, when I add in say the ears even, I might realize, oh, that crease needs to come down, or that crease, the shape in that crease is wrong, because everything is relative to each other. So it's important to get all those pieces in. So I'm just going to subdivide that slightly, and I'm going to treat the edge between here as the edge between these two pieces in the eye socket. I'm going to treat that as where the corners of the eye will be. I'm also aware that I'm not going to have this section here of this mesh is not going to be this cheek, because that cheek is so prominent. I'm going to use another piece to get that in. So let's just define where that jaw is real quick. Again, I'm kind of just doing it quick because I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out when there's not enough there to inform the position of everything. And also someone requested before this started, because usually in my previous streams in my UI I don't have my brush, so if anyone's looking for my brush, I have it just over here, just in case. So, and this is another thing, more about speed than anything else. Like this will do me for a neck, so I'm just going to pull it down, and then again shortcut key Control Shift S. I'll split that then. Pull it down. Just move it pull it out a bit, and then ZRemesh. So it's similar. It's actually kind of like, you know, a lot of artists work with the Dynamesh method, I guess you could call it. I guess now you have Sculptris Pro, but where you would just mask a section, pull it down, and then control drag. That could actually be a nice feature in the next ZBrush. Would be some sort of maybe like shift drag or something to ZRemesh. That could be kind of cool. It's the same, but we want to keep it in separate pieces. So obviously we can't Dynamesh. So that's why I have it as a keyboard shortcut. So I can just constantly ZRemesh and keep the poly count low enough that when I smooth, I get, like, if I subdivide there, I'll just use dynamic subdivision. It's the when you subdivide, you're getting a nice clean line. If I have a load of polys there, one, smoothing is harder, and two, especially on more intricate surfaces, you're gonna have all these lumps and bumps when you hit subdivide, and that's a problem. That's where you lose the cleanliness of it. So we have a neck in.
Now, a lot of your process here, Paul, looks like you're using the move brush mostly for moving stuff around and then smoothing.
Yeah, totally. Like at this stage, it's 95% the move brush, because it's getting in the broad shapes, so I don't need to use like a clay buildup or anything. Although if I do here and there, if I do feel like, okay, maybe this around here needs more, like I still will use that sometimes. It's not like a rule to only use that I'm setting to only use the move brush, but generally at this stage it's all you need.
And then the settings used for ZRemesh are just the ones at the top of your screen there. You pretty much do change the polygon count and then the adaptive size. Is that pretty much the two?
Yeah, like I don't change the adaptive size too much. I will sometimes if need be. Usually if I ZRemesh and I don't get the results I want, then I'll play around with the adaptive size. The target poly count, a lot of the time I'll actually pull it all the way down. So I have to deal, and even sometimes, which you'll see in a while, on certain elements, I'll ZRemesh as low as possible, and then go in with the I'll go in and cut more loops out of it, just to make sure it's the lowest it can be. For example, when I'm doing the eyelids, just to make sure that that way when I hit smooth, it's easier to control the curve then, because I've less points on the curve to actually grab. So I'm thinking already that this needs a bit more.
Now, when you start your characters too, do you find that you often will use symmetry at the start, or do you ever just go straight into pose?
No, I don't go straight into pose, but I'm kind of sculpting while always aware of the pose. What I mean by that is, you kind of have to always you're using your imagination all the time, because if a face is asymmetrical, you're sculpting it in such a way that you know you're going to have to reach that shape later with what you've got. So yeah, I sculpt with the pose in mind all the time, but I wouldn't start necessarily in asymmetry, but I do go into it pretty quick. Like once I get everything blocked in, and I will subdivide the pieces and sculpt into them and so on. Once that stage is done, I'll pose before I do before I Dynamesh it, because, and it's actually someone asked me this on Instagram like 10 minutes ago or something, because I posted the workflow on Instagram for anyone who wanted to grab it. They asked why the pose was the second part. So the pose is the second part because before I Dynamesh, it's much easier. Like if everything is one piece and I pose it, then I have to clean up where all the creases are, where I've masked and bent things and stuff. Where if I do the posing while everything's in separate pieces, and I'll often use the T-pose mesh, which is in the Z plugins. Transpose Master, there it is, for anyone who's wondering. I have it on the UI because I use it all the time. I'll generally do most of the posing in there with separate pieces, and then that's all, and all that's happening on the lowest subdivisions. So all that detail I sculpted into each piece, when I come back into the subtools, all the details are still there. They're still in separate pieces. I can work into them where I need to, so that it's clean earlier on, and then Dynamesh, and it saves a lot of time in cleanup. So I'll try to pull this nose in. So again, because things are relative, the eye, I can see the position of the eye, could do a bit of an update based on where the nose is, and the jaw could come way down. As well, I think people can get a bit like, that looks honky, but it's, at this stage, it's okay for it. It's no one's sculpt. You're working towards something. It's not. It's, the intention isn't to have it look amazing from the moment you start until the moment you finish. Like you don't want to get into that kind of mindset of like, oh, it doesn't look good, and you get fed up and stop. Because I have seen people do that. I think it just takes a bit of maybe getting used to the idea and your own workflow to understand that it's not going to look like this. Pretty soon, when you stick to it, pretty soon with a bit of experience, it'll start to come together, and you'll start to see where the character's going. So
we have a question for you on what hotkey did you find the ZBrush button to be the most, I guess, useful on your end?
Well, actually, I use Control Shift Alt for a lot of things, because it generally isn't a pre-existing hotkey in software, and so I use Control Shift Alt Z. And I've talked about this before. I'm sure there's other artists that feel the same, although I've never heard anyone describe it that way. But if it's kind of, I play the guitar, it's kind of like playing guitar chords, or getting used to guitar chords. Like obviously, because for example, if I broke the symmetry there and I didn't realize I was over here doing blah blah blah, and I didn't realize, what I'll do is, so this is on the wrong side, to mirror and weld, it wants it to be over here. So I have Control Shift Z as ZBrush, but then I have Control Shift X to mirror it, and then A, which is just above Z, to mirror and weld, and then, and I have local symmetry on, that's why that's not working, and then I can ZBrush again with just below it. So they all kind of, I mean, on their own, some of them don't necessarily make sense, but they all are kind of beside each other. So it's like leading one chord into another is the closest thing I find to the equivalent. So yeah, I use like the Control Shift or Control Shift Alt in combination with things a lot. And that doesn't get away, that doesn't overwrite then the hotkeys that are already baked in. Right, I need to. Okay, so let's get in. Pull this out a little bit more because I'm going to put in the horns, because obviously that's a major feature of this guy. So I can already see where the horns are going to go in. His head is a bit thin for that, so we're just going to pull it out a little bit. And something that's really important as well, I think, when you're doing a character, in terms of, so we all know you need to know your fundamentals, your shape, language, your anatomy. A really important thing that I see often being missed is this bone here, which I believe is the zygomatic arch. If you like on the side of your eye here, if you turn 3/4, you can still see the side of your head. So what can happen is a lot of people miss out on that, and it's too thin there, and when the head is at 3/4, you just get this bulging eye sticking out the side, you're obviously pushing proportions for stylized characters, of course, but I would describe that as pulling proportions rather than pushing proportions, if you know what I mean. Because what you're doing is you're not pushing an area and exaggerating it, you're removing it. Which, I mean, there's part of the beauty of art is you can break the rules, but you kind of need to be careful where you break them and how you break them. It needs to be for a good reason. And if you lose the side of the head here, what you're doing is you're creating this like bulgy looking eye, which tends to look very odd. Unless you're doing, I don't know, some sort of frog creature or something, then more power to you. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you keep the side of that. And you can see it here in the 2D. You can see the side of the head, a lot of the side of the head. Now, this is very asymmetric, as you can see, which I'll show you how I'm going to deal with that, because this is can often be a troublesome part of working from 2D. This does not correspond with this, as in this cheek here that's facing us does not correspond with this shape over here. So we're gonna have to do some doctoring to find out a way to make that work. Okay, so let's get these horns in. And I mean, like that, I could choose to put the ears in. It's not necessarily, I'm not picking certain things over other things necessarily for any reason other than I'm just trying to get in the biggest features first, because they're going to inform the rest. So here's our Z-remesh again, nice and low. I might actually just mask that. Okay, we'll just pull it a little bit down. Let Z-remesh worry about the rest. Now I can start to smooth. So like, I'm not, you see, like I'm pushing and pulling, and that's making it lumpy. But because it's low poly, I'm using actually alt smooth as opposed to just holding shift and smoothing, which is good, but actually I use that more for flattening surfaces often, or thinning them out. But alt smooth kind of averages the distance between the faces. As you can see here, if I do a lot of messing, and then when I do that, you see it just averages them back out and gets you that volume back. So I use that a lot. This whole stage, which if you're looking at the workflow, where very much in the crux of stage 1, is 98% move brush, and well, let's say 75% move brush and 25% alt smooth, and then the odd bit of maybe Damien standard, which I'll use now, and you'll see why. So I'll always use the Damien standard at a large brush size, and then I can use it just to kind of pinch that in, and then just again just smoothing it back. So let's knock these in real quick. Something like that. So I'm already kind of thinking that here these look kind of further apart. So I'm just going to move these out here, and then this is where we'll use our T-pose mesh. And we're going to just turn on symmetry and just mask like that. Just I'm just smoothing the mask a little bit, and then I'm just going to pull the head a little bit wider. Back into subtools, and I can keep working into that. So it's just at this stage, essentially what you're doing is you're putting in the elements broadly, and you're just reacting as you put in each element. That's kind of what you want to be doing at this stage. And the more elements you put in, the more you'll start to see where certain parts should be. So that's it. I'll just do that. So something I want to do here. Okay, so again, this is reacting. So this isn't necessarily, I don't have one way to do a mouth or one way to do eyes, but it's something I have done before. But what I'm thinking of, because you got this sharp lip and this big underbite, what I might do here is I'm just going to use the slice curve tool. Let's raise that up a little bit. And do that. And I'm going to treat the intersection between the two as the mouth. And then what I can do is I can separate these two pieces. I can separate these two pieces and extrude them, and that will give me the upper part of the mouth and the lower part of the mouth. Now it will be cut all the way across the back of the jaw, but that doesn't matter, because later when we Dynamesh, then we're going to be able to smooth that crease where we need to. So let's just group split.
Yeah, can you talk about that part again? What you just did for the mouth there? You got a few questions on it.
Yeah, sure. So the idea is I'm using the slice curve to cut in where the mouth is, where you see that smile. And the idea is I'm separating the upper lip and lower lip. Now it is cutting all the way through the jaw, but we can fix that later when we Dynamesh everything together. So I'm moving that, I'm creating that edge all the way through so that I can separate this cleanly and get a nice sharp line all the way down. And again, I'm gonna Z-remesh and all that good stuff. And once these are separate, I can now move these in. And when I do have these in a good position, I can extrude them back in. So I'll show you that now. And when they're extruded, then kind of that'll give the thickness of the lips, and that'll allow me to get a nice clean edge along there. So again, I'll just Z-remesh. And now I have again a low poly. There's only a couple of points compared to, like, I don't want to have to deal with this. You see, because it's gonna be, I have to control the entire curve. What I want to deal with is this, and then let ZBrush make the curve, because an algorithm is gonna make a clean curve better than we can. That sounds really Terminator-y. Machines are taking over. We Z-remesh that. So you can see we're getting that big bottom lip. So we're going to need to pull that in. And the reason we're going to need to pull this in is because if I leave that out from this angle, which is about where we're looking at from here, see the way you're seeing this, it's all the way to the tip of the nose where this line is. But if you look at here, you've got a little line, make that smaller, you've got the nose comes in and you've got this little line that drops down here. So I want to see, can I get that in here, which means this is like the horizon of a bend. So we need to see, can we find that? So we need to push this in. I'm going to remesh this a little bit higher. Yeah, that's a bit better. I just didn't, you can see there, I don't like this happening because it tends to show up when you dynamesh, or sorry, when you subdivide. So this is a bit more easy to work with in terms of topology. That's the other thing. If you know topology and edge flow and how that affects your model, that can definitely help. It's not necessarily, I mean, if you're doing this, after a while you're just going to start to see what's working and what's not. You don't have to go and learn if you're not necessarily doing any technical modeling and you're just sculpting in ZBrush. You'll see that yourself after a while through trial and error. So does that make sense? Tell me if that's if you need a bit more explanation on that one.
No, it sounds good.
You'll see now when I extrude in, it'll probably start to make more sense. So another thing I can do is I can throw in an edge here, and that way when I smooth it, so I'm extruding backwards, I'll just flip it back. And the nice thing is, see, at the moment we're having a problem because where extrudes based on the normal, how it faces the normal. So it's that they're extruding down slightly, but because we did it that way, it gives me a polygroup on the inside that I can just use the transform tool to select, control and click on, and now I can move that without affecting anything else. And we can do the same thing here. And I also, solo I have as control 1, because it's nice to be able to, especially when you're working this way, obviously you've got so many different pieces and you want to control each of those pieces. It can be often handy to solo them so you can see what you're doing a little bit better sometimes. especially like here, just adding in these loops. So again, another thing that's handy here is I can just control shift for the select tool, and click on this polygroup, and then use the forgetting the names of things. Oh, the Z modeler.
The lasso?
Nah.
Z modeler?
The Z modeler. And then I'm just going to mask here and here, and use the inflate brush, and just like keep this nice and low, and then again all smooth just to make sure it's nice and just to give a little bit of volume there. And the reason I want a little bit of volume there, like I'm obviously not pulling that from the 2D, but if everything if you ever hear like the either, well, sometimes you hear 80-20 or 70-30, the ratio of, in this case, curves versus straights, or volumes versus edges, you kind of want to be, I mean, you're not going to measure them, but you kind of want to be just aware of where you have volumes. Like here I've got this is a nice, you've got a nice curve here, this is going to be an edge here, a tighter edge here, and you've got a curve to what I call a hit just here, which comes back out into a curve. You get another hit here, and then instead of just a really abrupt straight line in, you still get another nice curve, so you have just a little sense of volume there, which can be appealing. Again, bit of a gap there, which I don't really want, so I can just, same as before, and just pull that in a little bit. There's two things that we're missing so far, that are really important, which is obviously the ears, and then this big cheek volume, which is going to change the head significantly. So an interesting thing, anyone who's ever worked in a factory will know this. Sometimes it's better to make a tool to make the thing you want to do, rather than trying to make the thing you want to do from scratch. And I don't mean making a brush, although that can be the answer sometimes. But what I'm going to do is, actually, we're going rogue now. I'm going to actually just draw that ear in the side of the head in the mask. Doesn't have to be exact. That'll do. Then extract, which is down in the subtool palette. It's just down the bottom here, so you can extract. So we'll do that, and then accept just below it. And this also gives me polygroups, and I only want one of them, so that'll do me. And I have a shortcut key there to delete hidden, so I'm deleting hidden, which is in under geometry, under modified topology, delete hidden. That was just accidentally just sitting right there. That was nice. So I'm going to straighten that up. Yeah, let's turn that on. Now, we've nothing on the other side, but I got my hotkey so I can turn on double so you can see it. So I just flattened that with the transform, mirrored it to the other side, and no, I didn't. Mirrored it to the other side, and then used the mirror and weld to do both, same as before. So now I can take this, throw on local symmetry so it stays in place. And that's kind of here, I think, based on, I mean, we're looking up, so it's a little bit higher than, say about there. Again, we can move it later if need be as we put in other parts, which is the real power of working in separate pieces, because if you don't, moving this when it's actually already part of the head becomes a headache. So as I'm moving them, seeing other things, just clear that mask. I need to refine this brow area more. So what I'm going to do is, even though that's the kind of shape of the ear, there's this overlap part. So I can just extrude this. It's on double, I think it's inside out. Yeah, flip it. So I can just extrude that. Add a loop in there just to keep its shape a little bit. And now I'm going to use this and I'm going to mask around this and pull that ear. So this is the tool. This isn't the ear, is the idea. So now, again, separate subtools, so I can mask this. That's the whole back part. And then just, I could even use that. That's got us most of the way home.
Are there any other parts of the mesh that usually make a tool before you make the asset? Like you did here with the ears?
It's really case by case. Like I said, it's not, I don't do ears like this in general, if you know what I mean. It was just, I knew I needed to make this overlap, and rather than, I could have done it, I could have taken that mesh, that flat plane, and taken the polys and just masked the top loop and shifted them, just moved them around, added a loop, moved it around, added a loop, moved it around to create that overlap there. But this way is quicker because I can just mask it and I have the overlap immediately. It's like I said, it's just kind of rather than thinking, well, this is how I make ears and just always doing that, it's kind of just taking a second to think, well, is there a little bit of a quicker way I can make this? So it's really case by case. Like, off the top of my head, I can't recall using a tool like this to get an overlap, but it's more just an example of a kind of mindset, if you like, to kind of think outside the box a little bit. Because as much as, I mean, I wouldn't say, you know, speed is not everything at all. Oftentimes you don't want to rush things. For example, this stage, you don't want to rush this stage, but the quicker you can get stuff in, the quicker you can see everything together. It lends itself to you being able to make it look good, and you can get through that stage of it looking awkward a little bit quicker. I'm always one, even I mentioned the guitar earlier, but I think it's with anything. If I'm like trying to teach anyone even ZBrush, or I mean, it really could be anything. I always find it's better to teach them enough that they can get something back from it really quickly, because then they'll enjoy it and they'll keep going. If you try to teach them how to use, like say for example ZBrush, if you try to teach them how to use the entire software before they've made anything, they won't understand what you can get back from it. So in this case, you know, whether it's making a character, and the enjoyment of doing that, if you haven't experienced that, then you can't really appreciate what the tool is doing if you can't see the benefits of, you know, it's all good to know what ZBrush does, but if you don't know where you could use it or why it's helpful. So just having things accessible quicker, I find is really helpful. So now I can fold this, because I want this ear to fold back in the bottom. Actually, this might be too long. I'm just looking, it's not that far down the ear, so I'll just pull that up. And because I'm working with a plane, I can, and I'm going to extrude and get those extra loops like I said earlier, then I can control the thickness. I can control the entire thickness rather than going in with like different brushes and trying to sculpt the thickness in. I can use the I can mask out one side with the poly groups and control the thickness perfectly. And the sculpting is kind of, that kind of sculpting is more saved for when you want to add on details on top of your forms. So pull this in. It's actually reminding me of, I've been rewatching Gargoyles from my childhood. It's been amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Love that show. Had all the toys. The ears reminded me of that a little bit. That's something I'd like to do some fan art of. Fan art of one of the gargoyles. Maybe Bronx the dog. He was awesome. So that will do me for now. Again, because we're at the blocking stage. So let's get another just lump in here, and we're going to pull that around. It's really tempting when you're doing this to go full Bob Ross. Just be like, we're going to put a happy little lump in here next to this.
I think that's how you know when you're actually into the sculpting and you're feeling the flow.
Yeah, you're making happy lumps.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Now, while you're doing this little lump here about yourself as well, so you're out of Ireland, correct?
I am born and bred.
And you
yeah, go on.
And you mostly do freelance stuff? Is that your kind of day-to-day?
No, I work in a studio called Brown Bag in Dublin, and I work on it's mostly like TV, but I also do freelance fairly regularly. So I kind of I generally, if I like a job, then like if I like something that comes up, I like the characters or I like the idea, then I'll jump into doing some freelance too. I try not to do it too much unless it's something that really takes my fancy, because obviously, you know, you don't want to completely burn out from working too much. I find that's where personal work is the key for me there. I don't if I work on that kind of stuff too much and don't do enough personal work, that's when I tend to burn out. But yeah, I work in brown bag, and I do design sculpts and technical modeling. So I'll do everything from the retopology and the blend shapes for the characters as well, or the facial expressions for those of you who aren't familiar.
And how long have you been using ZBrush in your kind of workflows and pipelines?
Well, actually, so I think I've been using ZBrush like 5 years now. But ZBrush was my kind of introduction to 3D to begin with, because before I did any ZBrush, all I did was 2D. I wanted to be an illustrator, and I did kind of, you know, full illustrations with backgrounds and characters and all that kind of stuff. And then a friend of mine told me to have a play around with ZBrush, that I might like it, and I did, and here we are. It was pretty, like, when I started my job in brown bag, ZBrush was basically all I knew. I was a character modeler, and that job in the description had retopology and blend shapes. I didn't know what a blend shape was, and I didn't know anything about, well, in college I'd done a little bit of, not even retopology, but we were like box modeling characters then, which I would never, I know I can see some people like doing that, and I can see the interest. I can see why some people like it, but that's not something I ever want to go back to. So that was my only knowledge of 3D at that stage, was like box modeling characters and stuff. And I was always kind of like the technical, when you're a modeler, I mean, the technical side of things is always there, but I'm much more into the artistic side of things. And so my reintroduction to 3D, if you like, was ZBrush. And I seen that I can sculpt, which I always like doing anyway, traditionally. I could actually sculpt in 3D on a computer. I was like, yeah, this is me. I'm all about this. And never went back. Well, I wouldn't say I never went back. I still draw, which I think is actually really important to being if you're doing design sculpts, having that like life drawing. To me, if you asked me how can I get better at ZBrush, I'd say do a life drawing class, because as much as obviously you need to know the software, but the tool is only as good as the craftsman, I feel like. So if you don't know the kind of fundamentals, like I talked about earlier, like anatomy or shape language, then there's no make my character good button. So you kind of need to, that's what I mean, it's something like life drawing to me was always a big game changer in terms of where my skill level kind of jumped, which I didn't do for 3D, of course. I just wanted to be better at drawing, but I think it translates directly across. I mean, you're still working with anatomy and shapes, just in ZBrush you're doing it in 3 dimensions. And I did life drawing in college as well. I went to a place in Dublin, Ballyfermot it's called, where I did an animation course. But at the time we didn't have ZBrush, so I didn't get to do any ZBrush. It was out, but we just didn't have it in college. So I didn't figure it out until very much later.
So I had a question. What size Cintiq are you using?
22. I have a 16-inch in work, and I mean it's fine, but if anyone, I definitely, if you've got the room for it, I definitely recommend the 22. It's I love this thing. I mean, it's not, to be honest, it's not necessary. It's not like your artwork's not going to be better than if you're using like an Intuos, but it's just a pleasure to use. Yeah, so we're getting this guy in here now, and I had the wireframe on the whole time because I was talking and not concentrating. So I'm gonna take this in because I can see it's not kind of long enough. We do need those eyelids in. Actually, we can do a little bit here.
I distracted you.
Yeah, for God's sake, he's always at that fella.
The other question I have for you, you mentioned doing retopology at your job too. Do you often use ZRemesher for any of your final topology, or do you tweak it out? Like, does it help you at all in that kind of situation?
As much as I want to say, yeah, I don't generally use, like, I use it on if I was making props and stuff, but just because character topology is so it has to be so specific, and as well, I mean, maybe in certain places you could if all your characters had different topology, but the thing is, especially working in TV, you need to make an entire show full of different characters, so you don't want to have to make a design sculpt, do the retopo and do the blend shapes from scratch on every single character, because you're often working across multiple shows and stuff as well. So usually you'd be, a lot of the time, unless on a new show, you can, you know, change the topology to fit what you think the style of the show requires and so on. But once you do that, then for the most part you're locked into that topology. So obviously, I mean, I guess you could try and hope that ZRemesh happened to knock out the same topology, but it's kind of, you'd be waiting around a long time. So usually,
what do you use?
Have to. Sorry, go on.
What do you use for your retopology when you do it?
Usually Maya. I use the quad draw in Maya. Maya is actually that was when I started in brown bag, and all I knew was ZBrush. So obviously I had to learn how to use. They use Maya, so I had to learn how to use Maya, which was actually, if you're gonna learn something, learn it on the job. I think I was well able to use Maya in like a month. Where if I was at home, that would probably have taken a lot longer. But yeah, that was the only other modeling software that I knew. Well, it's kind of a full pipeline software, but that kind of changed. Before I did that, I would have used like Dynamesh and stuff all the time, and then I started to figure out like, oh, okay, so this is how edge flow works and all that kind of thing, and that then found its way into my kind of workflow in ZBrush, like I was earlier, adding loops to the lips and stuff to just add that crease, like support loops, because obviously we're talking about animation, so it's animation kind of topology as opposed to like game. So here now I'm trying to just get, now that I've got a bunch of the pieces in, I'm trying to get those broad strokes back in. I think that brow is causing me issues. So let's try and oh god, the nose. yeah, so I'll give the nose some love here because it hasn't got much so far. And kind of pretty soon I can start actually. Now with this guy, because I'm doing the head, if I was doing the arms, I don't have time to do the arms and the fingers and everything today, but I might actually continue this sculpt when I have some time. But I would do all of this, block out the arms and everything in like a kind of A pose, and when they're once it's all blocked out, then I can, before I dynamesh it, then I can lift everything, put it in place. I've already sculpted details into certain parts, dynamesh everything, and then refine, and that way I have a lot less cleanup to do.
If you get a chance, can you pull up that your little spreadsheet again with your process you kind of go through for each character?
Of course. Just a sec. There you go. So you can see there, like, we're obviously still in step 1. So the next step will be you can pose it. So I can even just break that symmetry a little bit at this stage. And then it's dynamesh, duplicate, dynamesh. Actually, I wrote that wrong. I'm confusing myself. Dynamesh, duplicate, and then ZRemesh and reproject. So that might sound confusing to some people, but I'll cover that shortly. And that's mainly about keeping, even at that stage, you still want to have a low poly. You still want to have your subdivision so you can go down to low poly numbers, because that's going to help with any. That's going to help with any changes that you want to make at that stage. There we go. I think that was what was more. That was something was bothering me a lot there. And that might have been it. Kind of. So I'll just start subdividing stuff. Let's get the thickness in this here. And we can just use the inflate brush. Oh, it's inside out. There we go. Just do it again. Just use that inflate brush. So we're getting that extra thickness. You can see it there if I just do that. And what's really important about this, about controlling your thickness, especially somewhere like the ears, is because of what's called subsurface scattering. So for those of you who don't know what subsurface scattering is, that's when particles, light particles, it happens in your skin. It also happens in things like candles. The light particles penetrate your skin, and then they bounce around inside, and they don't quite escape out the other side. They don't have the energy to go all the way through. So they bounce around inside, and that's why if you like hold a torch up, I don't happen to have a torch handy, but if you hold like a torch up to your hand and you get that, like your hand glows red, and when you want to do renders, you want to have the thickness. So what's important when you're doing renders is that your character is real world scale, because things like thickness, it's designed in such a way that it needs to be, if your head is tiny and you have your subsurface scattering set really low, your whole head will still glow, because according to the scene, like the thickness is like that, because your head is tiny. So you need a full scale, a proper scale head, and that way so in the ears here, for example, and he's got prominent ears, so we want him to, it will be nice, I'm thinking about that kind of stuff too, it will be nice later that the subsurface scattering works nicely here. So if it's thicker down here where it would be and thinner up here, we'll get that nice subsurface scattering where it should be, rather than the whole ear lighting up because I didn't make it thick enough. And that's really going to help subsurface scattering on skin. It really takes it up a notch in terms of how your renders will look. Just going to add again as well, because I've got this extruded it, I can just add an edge in here. And just again lower subdivision, that way I can smooth a bit easier. Okay, getting around these eyes. So I know here is smooth, so I do want to keep that, but in terms of the actual volume and shape, I do need the depth there, that you'd have like like the bridge of your nose doesn't line up straight with your eye. Obviously there's a plane here that goes into the corner of your eye, so I'm going to do that, but I'm going to keep it smooth so I don't kind of kill that feeling. I don't know what stage I did that to the eyeballs. I'm just going to fix that real quick. And something I generally don't do is actually skew the eyes, but for this guy to meet this, I don't have too much of a choice. I generally try not to do that though. Why? Just because I'm stubborn. I like the idea of, in the end, I managed to make it work without having to kind of break the eyeballs. So how I'll make the eyelids. Oh, look at that. Yeah, there you go. Is the same way I did before with the extract. So I can just need the mask pen. And just do that. Now, okay, we'll extract here. Let's actually lower that down. It's a bit too thick. And it could be too thin. Oh, that could be still too thin. There you go. Set. Okay, so again, just I've Control and Shift to use the select rectangle. Click it and that hides every other polygroup, and then I just use Alt and D, which I've set as delete hidden. That way I'm back to a plane, and once I'm back to a plane, I moved the adaptive size there because this is such a plain shape. I don't want too many finicky bits, so I don't want ZRemesh to start, finding little bumps and trying to add loops in to support that. So that's why I'm bringing the adaptive size down, because that stops ZRemesh from doing that too much, because it's trying to keep the faces all the same size. So this will do me. Yeah, no, this will do me. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Actually, just for the sake of showing you, what I often do here, so I'll take that slice tool again. I'll slice down here and slice down here and do the same thing again. Get rid of that. And now what this does is you've got, because ZRemesh only cares about the actual surface, not any current, that it will change the topology into something that should be more up and across, well, yeah, crisscross, rather than making these kind of kites and stuff. So let's ZRemesh again. Oh, I have local symmetry on. Oh, okay. It's having a problem because I don't have something on the opposite side and I've got symmetry on, so I just mirror it and mirror and weld, and now I can go. See, so I don't like that, but I can just ZRemesh again. Hopefully, there you go. Now we're talking. And now what that allows me to do is, because I want this a nice clean curve, I can just use the Z modeler, put out every second loop.
I got a question for you on going back a little bit to the eyes when you were doing them, and you said you deformed them and usually try to keep them spherical. Do you find, like, just in your terms of your kind of animation stuff that you work on,
Yeah.
is it worse to animate eyes that are deformed rather than just keeping them all kind of spherical?
Yeah, well, what you want to do, I mean, if you're working on feature film, it's different because you've got more time to work on the characters. You can make them, you know, you can give each character individually a lot of love. On something like TV, where the characters have to be more similar, so they're probably all using the same set of pre-rigged eyes, and with a different texture for color, but the way around that is you have, they're pre-rigged and you can deform the eye after. So say I did this in the design sculpt, and I do the modeling pass. I would just take those rigged eyes and position them in the same place, and then I can skew them with the rig, and that way they'll still work perfectly for the character later, which I mean you would probably do in most feature films as well, just because it just saves trouble, you know what I mean? You don't want to have to do a whole eye rig separately for every character that when you're skewing the eyes. It often is needed though. You often do need to skew the eyes. So what I'm just going to do here is only have these visible, and then I'm going to use project all, and it's only projecting what's visible, so that's just snapping that to this. And then I can use inflate, which is under deformation. I have it here in the UI. Oh, what's it here? And that will just pop it out. Oh, make everything visible. If you didn't know, shift and click on the eye. It will apply it to every subtool. So that's in there now. So now I can extrude that, and I'm going to extrude it just a little bit, and then I'm going to control click on that polygroup with the transform tool to select it, and just pull the thickness of the middle out more and have it taper in, because that's another thing when you're making shapes. You want to lean towards dynamic shapes, because non-dynamic shapes by nature are kind of boring. Straights, ups and downs, and left and rights, and 90-degree angles and stuff like that. And you don't want things to be like overly symmetrical, and you don't want tangents. So what I mean by all that is, say for example the head. If I have this, so you see the way this is a dead straight line down the back. So this is in contrast. The idea here is this is in contrast to this. This complements this. If you have this on this side and then more and then equally complicated on the other side, it's not appealing to look at. It's not balanced. This tends to lend to this. So in the same, like, this as a result becomes, like I said earlier, a statement. This is there for a reason. It's not just happened to be straight because the artist just dropped his hand. It's very much on purpose. And obviously I'm doing this in 3D, so I can see it from the front. The 2D artist can't. So I need to continue that. And that's something that you really always want to be thinking about. It's probably the most important thing to be thinking about, is how your shapes complement each other. And that should be really at the forefront of your mind. Because even if it turns out that, let me turn all the body paint off, that the character you're making doesn't quite turn out like the 2D, if you're always keeping your shapes in mind, at least it'll still look good. Where if you don't keep your shapes in mind and you're just blindly trying to copy the 2D, you're very likely to turn it to the front and see something you don't like. Ideally, obviously, what you want to be doing is make something that does capture the 2D, but when you turn it to the front, you've made it also work. Or when you turn it to, completely to the side profile or even the back. So that's really important. So we pretty much have all the elements in, and I can probably jump to one I prepared earlier, as Mary Berry used to say. Where am I? Okay, so we'll do that.
We had a question about what material are you using too?
Oh,
Is it your own custom one?
No, I use I'm using the ZBro materials. I'll show you that now. Let's let that run. I've actually got there's a bunch of them there. So I've got the ZBro set, which are really nice. Let's see, can I show you a few? That one, and I use this one pretty often too. I don't like to use anything too fancy because it tends to obstruct your vision. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of weird stuff like this. I'd never sculpt with this. That's from another set. But all these ZBro ones are actually really nice. You've got some, that's the one I'm using, and then you've got there's a nice kind of selection in there, whatever tickles your fancy. There's also really handy is the ZBro paint, which is what I use once I dynamesh everything, once I've posed and dynameshed everything and stuff. I'll often even at this stage I could start painting. Actually, I could talk about that now. That's a good point. That material, which I keep down here, is handy because it's clean and it's white. I don't want to paint on something like this, obviously. Another one you can use though is the skin shader, the skin material, which is there, skin shade 4. That also works. And when I paint on this, then the texture, the poly paint then translates well when I bring it over, when I export that texture and bring that into a render engine. Obviously if I'm using a material that has color to it, I'll just switch that back, then when I export that texture, that material no longer affects that texture when I bring it into the render, and I'm going to get very, very different results. So that's also really handy to have. yeah, I'd recommend them. I know a good few people who use this. But yeah, I can also start, I could just poly paint this now, and that way I can pose it and detail it, and all the poly paint will be there, and when I dynamesh it all together, it'll still work. So get that in there, and I can kind of clean up where I need to after. Another thing, just while I'm doing that, while I'm thinking of it, here when I'm just getting in this crease here, is keep an eye on your Z intensity. Like, you don't want to be working with this. It creates all these valleys that you don't necessarily want. So if you keep it low, you can kind of control it much better. Maybe a little bit higher than that. It tends to be a lot cleaner. So I'm gonna just finish this eyelash that I made, or sorry, this eyelid that I made, real quick, and yeah, I can skip to the other one then. I think, how are we doing on time? How far in are we? I feel like I'm gonna be surprised now. Like, you're talking for 3 hours, Paul.
You're close. You're close to an hour and a half.
Oh really? Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, we need to speed
Hey,
things
but
along
you've
then.
been giving out great information, so
Awesome.
it's been going well.
Good. See, just the chat thing, so. Yeah, okay. Let's do this. See the way I just pull it out, and then it Z-remesh is like, okay, you want a corner there, no problem. Me and Z-remesh are real good buddies. It's funny how something like Z-remesh, if someone hadn't invented Z-remesh, I mean, I'm sure I'd find out some other way, but if someone hadn't invented Z-remesh, like, my entire workflow almost centers around that one tool. I don't know how complicated that was to make. Okay. I won't add that yet. I'm gonna do this like I did before, and then pull it out. I just want to get to a point where you can see the character here start to in the blocking stage, and then I can jump across to the other one where I've kind of. Actually, I might be far off this, but anyway. So you can kind of see there's a couple of little bits like the earlobe. There's a couple of shapes there that aren't quite completely figured out. But so we can jump to this one where I've kind of done a bit more just beforehand. And what we can do now is at this stage, just nothing's different. I've just spent a little bit more time doing exactly what I was doing there, and now we can dynamesh things together. We could see, I'm after preaching all this stuff about pose at step 2, but like this guy doesn't necessarily, but we'll mess with it just to show for examples. So this kind of weird cheek thing that's going on out here, if I was to make that in this sculpt from the front view, that would look bizarre. Now I could try and take this and use it over on and use that on both sides, but I mean I like this. I mean, if you did that you wouldn't be wrong, but I do like this volume here, which is why I chose to do that. So let's see here. I can pull this out a little bit just to help. And again, I have the subdivision still there, and then I can pull this out a little bit. This is what I mean. If I had to do this while everything was dynameshed, I wouldn't be able to pull on this without affecting this, and I wouldn't be able to smooth it without smoothing the edge in between, which I don't want to do. So that's why I pose at this stage. That's why you can also paint at this stage. Let me get this back. You know, you can take the ears and maybe make one kind of tilt down, whatever you want to do. You can see already, like, that bit of asymmetry, like a little bit of asymmetry can go a long way. Because people aren't asymmetric. Obviously, if you're doing production, then you need it to be asymmetric. At least at the modeling stage, you want to neutralize it and make it asymmetric. So let's dynamesh this.
Now, is there any reason why you use Dynamesh over, say, the live Boolean union processes?
I guess more than anything, it's just the way I'm used to doing it. Let's see, just literally the way I'm used to working with it. Because all I really need is just everything to be one piece. It's as simple as that. But I mean, what's that saying? What was it? 100 ways to skin a cat or something? Help me out here, Joseph.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm after putting the eyes and the horns at the top of the subtool menu. And now from here, everything else I need is one subtool, and I'll just dynamesh it. And I usually, so you can, down here you've got merge down. So you can see there, control and down arrow. So I usually, like, if I say I need to grab a subtool, and then I'll use up, and then I'll control down to combine it. So there, I'll just move that up, and then control down when I need to combine stuff. So I could also just merge visible, which works fine too. And then just split the eyes and the, oh look, and okay, so this is, so a bit of problem solving here. This is what I was talking about earlier, I think I was talking about it earlier. You don't want, I was using dynamic subdivision, and once I combined it, it lost that, which obviously I don't want, because I don't want to dynamesh this because it's gonna come out as a low poly. So I can just auto group and just get rid of it. Oh. If I then mask everything, then unhide, then I can just split it. So divide a few times. That looks fine. And then back in. So this is, so we can dynamesh this all together now. And the nice thing about this is it will give us creases anywhere we've left two edges that are intersecting. And what's really handy about that, and it comes down to that clean thing again, is you don't have to go in with a brush and try to get these curves in and creases by hand. And as well, it's very tricky to get like two meshes that intersect that way at a crease. If you use like the Damien standard or anything, you tend to get like a bit of a V shape almost. Or if you use like if you use the pinch, you tend to get like a bit of a V shape almost. And then just in terms of just trying to do lines by hand all the time, this will give you, because we've after putting this in low poly and stuff and we can control the edges, then your creases are all really clean and you get curves exactly the way you want them. So the next trick is to get our subdivision levels back. So we can duplicate this, and then we don't need symmetry on because we've broken the symmetry. We don't want this super low, just low enough that we can still smooth things and stuff. But if we go too low, what happens is the reproject tends to obviously struggle because there's like you've lost so many volumes in so many places, so you do need to keep it a little bit higher. This is a bit trial and error, so if you have any questions, now's the perfect time. Once we have this Z-remeshed, that'll be our first subdivision level, and then we can reproject the detail from the other head, the dynameshed head, back onto, we're going to subdivide a couple of times and reproject all that detail onto the subdivision levels, which only until very recently did I actually use projectile, because it used to be the case where you had to subdivide, project. So that was a nice little addition. And this is going to take a little while, as you can see, because it's obviously dealing with a fair amount of polys. So, any questions? This is the
so
ideal
we got a lot of people that want to see you stream more. So there's definitely some enthusiasm over that.
Awesome.
They say they like it when you talk too.
Okay. That's cool.
They're really excited about your processes. So
awesome. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
And then for the material questions you have, which ZBro mat cap is that? The one you're using?
I can tell you as soon as ZRemesh finishes doing its thing.
I don't know if you had it visible on your screen there anywhere that you can.
No, I can't see the full thing. I want to say it's ZBrush Clay. It might be just like ZBrush Clay Bronze or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'll let you know.
A link to his blog site, and I think they're all up there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'm actually, just due to like things like I was doing some prep for this and some freelance work, and then working with the studio brown bag, so it gets tricky at times. Generally not, like I was streaming quite a lot there for a while, but then the freelance came along and stuff like that, so that's just kind of held me back a little bit from streaming, but I definitely will be streaming more often.
Do you have any tips for people trying to get into kind of the style that you do here, and if they're maybe have used ZBrush in the past and they're looking to get back into it, just kind of ways to start to get back in?
Yeah, I mean, watching stuff like this, ZBrush Masters, or watching I feel like, for me at least, if I'm not feeling kind of motivated to sculpt, I generally, if I watch someone sculpting something cool, I'm like, oh, I want to sculpt now. So I do think that does help. But like I was saying earlier, if you want to get back into it, and you the important part is not to bite off more than you can chew. Like, try to be realistic. Don't try to do some crazy half organic, half mech thing with tons of detail. It's going to take months, because if you have to relearn a bunch of tools, or if you're trying to pick up ZBrush to begin with, there's so much there that you're gonna have to take on. That it's definitely, at least for most people. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. It's gonna be really, really tricky to hold true, and the problem is, it's gonna take so long before, like I was saying earlier, you get that reward back, that you'll lose interest before you get to that threshold. Keep it simple. Do a nice bust. Find a nice bust, or find like something I often say is actually, it's something another artist told me that I work with and I stream with as well, Rory Bjorkman, that I wholeheartedly agree with. If you're watching tutorials or something, like say if something I want to get into actually is to make some tutorials, but say I'd done a tutorial on this whole workflow and you're following it, I wouldn't say, if I was doing this character, I wouldn't tell you necessarily to do this character, because you want to have that interest, you want to be involved in the actual outcome, or else it doesn't feel like yours and the satisfaction is less. When you can make a character something at least decent in your eyes, whatever level you're at, there's a satisfaction, and then you want to do it again, and that will keep you going. So I think that would be my advice. Keep it simple and get that gratification then of making something.
Do you have any projects you've worked on that you've it's been like what's your favorite project, I guess, you've worked on in all of your ZBrush modeling career? It's a tough
That's
one.
a big one. What's my favorite? To be honest, I think like this might sound a bit egotistical, maybe, I don't know, but no matter what I work on, I think in terms like even what I'm working on, I don't think I can really talk about it, but because I'm currently working with a company on some freelance, and it's a big company and it's cool, and working with some great people and working on some really cool concepts, and that's awesome, and I love that. You know, that's the kind of that's kind of why you do this as a career, is to get those really cool projects. But no matter how good the project is, I'll, in terms of, I guess it depends on what your definition of favorite is, but I get by far the most out of just doing my own personal work, especially when I do my own designs. That's where I enjoy it the most, is when I do the 2D. And I say it sounds maybe egotistical because I want to have pure ownership of start to finish, and I do get satisfaction out of that. That said, like doing this, like I really enjoyed sculpting this Randy Bishop one. It just, that's in terms of my favorite, when I do my own stuff. So like for example, I really enjoyed the gangster character that I did in the end, but I actually gave up on that. That went into, and some of you might be able to relate to this, I have a graveyard of sculpts that never got finished, that I just I got halfway through and I was like, I'm not feeling this, and I didn't just stop, I did something else. I moved on to something else, took whatever I learned from it and kept going. And that gangster never was very, very close to never seeing the light of day. Sorry, there you go. Only for, it was actually like a contest. That's not it's like a competition that they have in Brown Bag every month, where called the Art Jam, where everyone they give a theme and everyone puts in their, whether it be 2D or 3D, and I was doing a detective, just because I wanted to do a detective. I enjoy the kind of look of like film noir and stuff, and I wanted to do this detective, and I had it like 90% done, and I was like, I don't like it, and I just trashed it, and I didn't touch it for like 2 months. And then this competition came along, and the theme was gangster movies or something, gangsters or something. And I was like, oh, I could use that detective. So I just opened it back up, fixed it up a little bit, and finished it off and posted it. And it got received well. Like, a lot of people seem to have liked it. A lot of people on LinkedIn, which was a weird one. I've never got a big reception on LinkedIn before. That was interesting. But that could be to date my favourite one to work on. I know a lot of people like the mouse sculpt, and I know that's what most people, when they kind of see the mouse sculpt, they know, oh yeah, I'm so sick of looking at that mouse sculpt. I did it like, what, 3 years ago, something like that. And I honestly would. It's just because I can see. I mean, I guess maybe some other people can as well, but I can see the problems in it because it's so old now. There's so many things in it that I would have done differently if I was doing it now. So yeah, I guess. Although I did really enjoy the Voldemort too, even though that was actually from a concept of the head, was from a concept from Nicholas Cole, but I did really enjoy that. It was really challenging to get all those planes and those shapes right, which is why I picked it.
Just yeah, it's a nice model.
Cheers, thanks. So just real quick here, you can see now I've got there's our Dynamesh. Don't need that anymore. Bye bye. And now here, oh, did I just do that? Joseph, what have I done?
I was answering questions.
Talking. We're blaming Joseph for everything today.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. So I just deleted what I Z-remeshed and reproject all, but you get the idea. It will mean you'll have. Well, I hope you get the idea. Clarify. If you need me to do it, I can do it again. But it means you've got your subdivisions again. And once you've got your subdivisions, you can go in, still do it here, so you can still show you. Just if you've got subdivisions, it's a lot easier, just because you can drop down to a lower subdivision and smooth things much easier. But basically, it's just like smoothing these kind of curves. Like here, you can see there's like you don't want this hard line here, so you'd want to like smooth that out. I can kind of go in with the clay build up. And just help that smooth back a little bit. And at this stage as well, you can go and add in those kind of details. Like, let's just. There you go. Sorry, slowing down a little bit. Let's get you out of the way. There we go. And you can, like, add in little creases like so on in here, maybe smooth that out a little bit. You can do all this, and this is at this stage, this is a bit more involved in terms of sculpting, and it depends on you can see there, because I broke the symmetry. So just pretend that didn't happen. I'll put my hand over the screen like that's making a difference. And I would do that across the whole sculpt. That at that stage, my mind is almost turned off once I get to that stage, in comparison to when I'm blocking out. The blocking out is, I can't stress enough, by far the most important part. And if you jump, which is what often people do, interesting enough in 2D as well, they want to get through that part because they want to get to the details. And the thing is, I understand loving the details, but you're not doing the details justice if the foundation doesn't work, because you can't save it with details. If your fundamentals don't work, your anatomy, your shape language, and when I say shape language, I'm kind of using that as broad, like your curves, your straights. If all that doesn't work, it's not balanced, the silhouette isn't working, which I can kind of talk about a little bit maybe. I don't know, we could be running out of time.
You're getting close. You're getting close. We got one question here. Could you just talk through the process again of what you did after you dynameshed the model, and then how you got to the reprojection process? Just talk through the steps.
Well, I can actually just do it real quick on the horns, because that way it's not. So like say, as I say, I added a bunch of like, you know, the little bits here, and let's say, I don't know, let's just put this in here, delete that. So I'll just give you a quick demo. So say, okay, dynamish that, great. So say I want these kind of details and stuff. So I've dynameshed, so this is my dynamesh. I've no subdivisions anymore because all my subtools have been combined into one, and now they're, after they're dynameshed together, your subdivisions are well gone, which you need, because you can see me struggling to even clear up that edge, the crease on his cheek there a little bit. Not struggling, but it's just, yeah, especially when you want to keep your curves and stuff like that. Like I said before, you don't want lots of polys because you tend to get lots of lumps then, because it's too hard to manage that many. So now I can duplicate this, so you can see here if I move that, we've got two, they're sitting on top of each other. So we just Z-remesh this at an average rate. Don't Z-remesh it too low, especially with something as complicated as a head, because you lose so much volume that reproject might miss some things, because you've made, like, the polys are so low that, like, there's shapes there that is completely lost now because you don't have the resolution to hold them up. So you want to keep it low enough that your smoothing and stuff is still very workable. You don't have a large amount of polys. You can see here, something like this is fine. Even a little bit lower you'll get away with. And then what we do is, so we want this now to look like the dynameshed version, so we just subdivide a couple of times to get that resolution back. Now we've got subdivisions, and if you go down under the subtool palette to project all, under, you see project here at the bottom, and what that'll do is that will project the detail of the other visible tool. That's why I've hidden everything else, and project that detail onto each level of the subdivisions. And so at the end of it, this being the character's head, you will have your head now with better topology because you've used Z-remesh, and multiple subdivision levels, so you can still smooth and move things around and refine, and you can use your higher, obviously you want your higher subdivision levels for your details, like the crease in the eye like I showed you. So, and that's it. I hope that explains that okay.
Yes, thank you.
And so here is the sculpt I did. So you can see it there. I didn't do the arms and stuff like that. I was more focused on the head. I threw in the body just to kind of give something to it rather than a floating head. So I painted this up in poly paint. Again, another reason why you want your subdivision levels, I was able to bring the subdivisions all down to 1 on each piece, on each mesh, then go into the UV master, unwrap everything. Unwrap everything, and then the multi-map exporter, and export all the textures from the poly paint. So all of this got UV, the character is UV'd quick because it UV'd at the low subdivision level. You don't want to UV at the highest because it's too much to compute. It's just going to take longer. And once once that's run, you can export your maps with your polypaint, and you can do whatever you need to do then. I mean, whether that's bring it into an external renderer, or you can render in ZBrush, and you'll get multiple passes, and you can kind of composite that in Photoshop. That's another one that a lot of people use. I know Rafa Grizzetti does that. I mean, if it's good enough for him, it must be good. I personally use Arnold. I used to use RenderMan for a while, but I use Arnold now just because it's native in Maya, which is handy. And that's where, remember earlier, comes back into play your subsurface scattering and your thickness and stuff. So I bring it into Maya, scale it up to the right scale, and do my renders, set up my lights and do the renders. So I can show you actually. So there's the 2D, and there's the render out of Arnold. I actually think I have another one. I should have another one there. There you go. Kind of more straight on. It's really funky looking actually. The eyes are probably, well, they are too much. There's too much specular, but I actually kind of like it. Something jazzy about it. And yeah, and that is. So if you go back to this real quick, so there's your Dynamesh and reproject, like I explained. So we've gone through the pose, we did the blocking, duplicate, Dynamesh, reproject, then we refined with the little details. You can see here, like the little details, the little creases and stuff like that. Make sure your edges are all working. There's your subsurface scattering in the ear, the details on the horns, and then that's something for stylized characters. Economy of detail, always remember that. Details where they're needed and they feed the narrative, not details for the sake of details. And your polypaint, which, as I said there, you can do earlier if you want. And yeah, you throw it all out, and that, kids, ends today's class.
So I got a few questions here, and then we'll sign
absolutely.
up here. First one, they want to know, what are your 3 most frequent used brushes? Now, I could probably name them out.
Absolutely. Yeah, do it. Go.
So you can tell me if I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go with the Move brush.
Wrong. No, go on. Yeah, nailed it.
So we're gonna go with the Smooth brush with the Alt smoothing.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna go with the Dam Standard brush.
Yeah. That's you hit it on the head.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I use the pinch every now and again, and the inflate every now and again, and that's basically it. Everything else is like very, something really specific you have to make, and you're like, oh well, it's good to know the brushes, because I can use the curved tubes for that, or so it's good to know them. But yeah, 98% of the time, if not more, that's exactly what I use.
Also, I'm gonna have you hop over to our YouTube channel, so youtube.com/ZBrush@Pixologic. We have a lot of questions if people want to re-watch this, so I just want to get that web page up so they can see where that is.
Cool.
If you don't mind hopping over there quick.
Yep.
And then the other question we have while you're doing that is, when you rendered it out, did you use the high-res version of the model, the highest subdivision level, or did you end up taking the low one over and then sending maps along?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I should have covered that. You can use maps. You can use like normal maps or displacement maps. What I did was I used the Decimate, which is here, Decimation Master, where you use pre-process, and then you can bring your level of decimation down, and what that does is it reduces the poly count, and you can bring it straight in then. And what an important thing you want to do there, you can see I have it highlighted, is keep UVs, because otherwise your maps won't go on it when you bring it into whatever software you need to use to do your rendering. So keep UVs, pre-process, and then decimate. that's how I brought it into for render. Okay, I'm on the Pixologic ZBrush YouTube
Yeah, can you put that on
page.
your on your stream there?
Direct me.
I don't see it yet. Up there we go. Yeah, so this is you're watching today. This was Paul Deasy, and thank him so much for coming out and doing the stream. This is part of the ZBrush Masters series that we've been running. All these streams that we were doing, you can check out our schedule and calendar at ZBrushLIVE.com. And then after they have been streamed, they will be able to be rewatched on our YouTube channel. And you can actually just go over to our YouTube channel, and it's youtube.com/ZBrush@Pixologic. And then there will be restreams of all the ZBrush Masters, along with our other streams that we do daily on ZBrush Live. So lots of information on ZBrush for you all to pick up. And I want to thank Paul Deasy again for coming out and streaming.
Thank you, Joseph.
All the
it was
way,
a pleasure.
all the way from Ireland.
All
yes.
the way from sunny Ireland, believe it or not, for a change.
No rain today. That's
yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, it was awesome. And thanks
So
to
you have a
everyone
lot of
that
fans
joined in
here?
as well. Yeah, it was awesome. It's great to see everyone that jumped
We have
on.
a lot of requests for more streaming from you, so just take that in consideration. We're
I'll
going to try to
see
get them
if
on
yous are-
ZBrush Live here.
If you are good, I'll think about it.
So
No,
thank
I'd love
you
to,
all.
yeah. Thanks, guys.
Any last words, Paul?
Oh, you put me
Any
on the
words of
spot.
wisdom?
Why did you do that? You could have just had a clean slate there and just ended it, and you put me on the spot. I'm just gonna sink down out in my chair. No, thanks for everyone that came in and joined us. I hope you've learned something. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, and I definitely will be streaming more often. Once I get through this hump, everyone's stuck in our houses, and I was afraid I'd have nothing to do, so I took on too much. So I'm just trying to get over that hump, and I'll make more content, some tutorials hopefully throughout this year as well, is the idea. Fingers crossed. So yeah.
All right. Well, you got the stop streaming button on your end.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you all for showing up.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
All the best.